So this this essay is going to be called "The Confrontation of Meaning," and I think it's interesting how this just keeps revealing itself to me. To express this and to give it light, to give it honor and word and depth, because my work is traditionally in metaphysics. It's in philosophy. It's in science, thermodynamics, classical physics, as well as quantum mechanics, and fusing the understanding of science with philosophy to create a real human perspective of who we are, why we're here, what we're doing, and to map the larger cosmological trajectory of the development of the human species over millions, billions of years, right? To look at the origins of the universe and attempt to understand what is the essential element of being, what is the thread that runs through all of existence. And that itself is the thread which we actually embody as a human species, right? It's a linguistic weaving that is genetics, right? It's the language of the species that actually assembles the human body through reproduction, right? The thread of the gene is life on Earth, right? So that we are something and of something and becoming with something that's inseparable from everything, right? We are that. That's the expression in the Vedanta, in the Hindu Vedanta. We are all things, right? So we're trying to understand, in trying to understand ourselves, what we're really trying to do is understand existence. And for a long time, my my work existed in this sphere, which you can only really call abstract representation. You have to use metaphors. You have to create images to show people this because it's too big. It's too big. You could gesture to a flower or you could gesture to a human being and you can show people the the network of happenings that brought this flower or this human being into being and talk about what is the essence of that thing. But with baseball cards, I think there's something that's very humble, very devotional, very material. It's made present. This Colmenares card here is a really pertinent example because this is a Venezuelan hero. This is a cultural hero who has been memorialized in the concept of the immortal, right? That's at the top right of this card. Memorialized in this piece of cardboard that's exchanged and traded as an essential cultural figure in Venezuela's national identity formation. So I want to tie that back to what I was just saying because this is a materialization of a very complex process of becoming, which for this moment in time there exists the species of the human being, right? And we are grappling with our understanding of this deep dark cavern from which we emerged, which is the deep dark cavern and tunnel of history. And this, as I go back to in the austerity essay, the aesthetics of austerity, is terrifying. So culture is a mediation and a moderation of this great and profound fear of death, isolation, individuation, the consequences of being born and the consequences of dying, right? The consequences of being asserted or thrown into reality, as Heidegger would say, thrown into being, and you're grappling with these existential circumstances that you don't understand. You have to learn the body. You have to learn nature, right? This is a process where you're thrown into existence, and what happens for the most part, right, with the exception of a few, maybe Da Vinci or Goethe are great examples. You're thrown into being, and what you have to latch onto is a justification or a rationale, um, a way of explaining your existence, forming your identity, uh, cultivating a sense of self, which is not it's not based on truth. in a real metaphysical, scientific sense. It's based on the assertion of an identity which has to withstand the onslaught of nature. It has to withstand and buffer itself against the fear of death. It has to justify itself enough to survive and exist in a world and an ecosystem populated by many other life forms. This is what culture is, right? If you look at culture as a formation, it always is really without exception beyond genius, which genius is always a degree of comprehension. It may be several degrees, like Spinoza's genius or Leibniz's genius, right? These are polymathic forms of genius that are able to comprehend from multiple different perspectives, right? Whether that's science or political theory or history, biology, philosophy, psychology, right? All of these different dimensions in which you can penetrate into the essence of being. And from seeing by many different angles, you can begin to actually form a realistic, holistic picture of what the cosmology of the essence of existence is, right? It's like a fractal that you can look at the psychology of a human being. And if you understand psychology at a deep enough level, you start to look at cosmology, which is the formation of galaxies. And you can start to see the fractal resemblance in existence. And this fractal existence is something that is elucidated by Da Vinci and Goethe and other polymaths of extreme vision, right, of extreme presence. These people who are in the human history of genius. So looking at these cards, you have to understand just how important they are and how powerful it is that they exist in these thin, flimsy pieces of ground up cardboard, right? This memorial, this totem, this way of memorializing and remembering the foundations of a culture of play, of joy, of struggle, of sacrifice, and of emergence. These players, right? Baseball is not just a game in Venezuela or Cuba or the United States, and now in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic. Baseball is a way of creating a collective identity, right? It's a way of gathering around the fire in the midst of an abstract, perennial void. And so, what culture really is it's what holds a civilization together. And when you step back and away from that, the bottom drops out into an absolute void of existence, a void of being, right? An abyss. This is not abstract, right? This is what I'm trying to communicate to you is not abstract. It's a reality of existence. If you were to step away from the cultural fire of baseball or national mythology, a concept of self that is communally accepted, what happens in that circumstance is you lose the civilizational thread which constitutes the very nature of your being that has been justified and mutually accepted by those around you. This is the function of religion. It's the function of politics. It's the function of culture. Every single human communal endeavor is based around this necessity of survival through the establishment of common culture. Stripping that away is when you get into the metaphysical, real, but also abstract void of the experience of void. And so this is what I brought up in the aesthetics of, what did I call it? Aesthetics of Austerity essay, because that was that moment in the 1939 play Ball when I'm really looking at that card set and I'm looking at, this is the moment where the illusion has achieved this level of collective sobriety, which almost constitutes a spiritual awakening. That this country has undergone such a transformative, destructive, ego battering period where the collective cultural illusions have broken or are on the verge of breaking. So this is like a psychological dam, right? And it moves in historical cycles of, you could almost call it purification. Because what the human species is seeking to do through culture at any given moment in time is establish a common framework of understanding through which human beings can exist without being in a stage of absolute existential fear and panic, which comes from misunderstanding, right? So culture is the buffer between truth and absolute utter delusion and chaos, right? Between truth and delusion and chaos is culture. Culture holds this line of being the substitute or the surrogate for meaning or the surrogate for knowledge through storytelling, through collective communal participation. All of these things are ways of holding the ball up in the air, so to speak, of a collective human civilizational identity, which allows for existence to continue and not to fall or be thrown from the tower of civilization or culture into absolute and utter chaos and destruction. This is the real power and importance of culture, and I give that a level of sanctification, so to speak, because what you look at when you look at the history of intellectual or scientific or philosophical genius, you're looking at people who have really penetrated the veil of reality and confronted this void, this depth of void. This is something that's common to the quantum physicists just as much as it's common to the most extreme and far-reaching philosophical figures, right? You look at people like David Bohm, or you look at Nietzsche, or Heidegger, or Heraclitus. These are all figures that, from different angles, right? Whether that's through quantum mechanics, whether that's through physics in the case of Newton, or you could look at Einstein, or you look at people who approach it through metaphysics, Heraclitus or Nietzsche. What Nietzsche does in particular, I will say this, is he penetrates the veil of culture and reveals the void, the emptiness, and the negation within it, and the necessity of establishing communal collective culture to keep people in this insane sanity. And what I mean by insane sanity is that, let me think of a good way to put this. The establishment of the collective consciousness as like a cultural archetype, let's say baseball is the epicenter of that, or educational institutions are the epicenter of that. This is not about truth. It's about the assertion of what creates comfort and stability. It's a cultural story, which again I said resides between truth and utter madness and dislocation and destruction. It's the necessary balance that at any moment through the force of nature can be thrown, right? That cultural tower, a civilizational tower, can be toppled, and then people are thrown into the madness of confusion, dislocation, fragmentation, and loss. And so I've been using the baseball card to track this fluctuation, which is almost like a seesaw between madness, deification, and truth. And the balance between madness and truth, especially through this wartime period, World War I, the Depression, and World War II, the cultural balance and the creation of the mythology of baseball is thrown into madness and instability. And you can see the collective consciousness oscillate between this this kind of candy-coated, hyper-cartooned, hyper-real, as I was discussing with the Gaudi cards or the Diamond Stars cards, it's so surreal, it's so dislocated from reality. You have the red skies, the yellow skies, the crazy colors. There's no more environment that's recognizable. It's been thrown entirely into a cartoon, as opposed to just 5 years later, the 1939 play ball set, which is entirely real, entirely subdued, stark representation. It's like you're looking at life through glass. It's been minimized. It's been reduced. So you see what I'm saying? There's this maximalism of extreme color and cartoon wonkiness and strangeness, and then this minimalism of reduced, glass-bound, hyper grayscale representation. And this is the seesaw that I'm talking about, and this is all occurring through real human collective experience that is being metabolized not only at the personal level, but at the collective cultural civilizational level. And this influences, it's an aperture, it influences the way people perceive reality, because it's a negative feedback loop. They're seeing what they're observing within the culture, and they're putting that back into the culture. So as you can see, it's a collective constitution of many people's apertures, which is a perception of a reality. And this is the thing that's so ultimately destructive in what destroys civilizations, what destroys communities, and what destroys cultures. Because you're attempting to establish a meaning-making system, right? But this is not a meaning-making system that's based on truth. This is a meaning-making system that's based on a proxy for truth, right? Because what truth really requires is a penetration into and perception of reality on a level which humanity itself is very rarely, if ever, capable of, to any degree, right? Whether that's a perception of reality through the lens and aperture of physics or thermodynamics or biology or chemistry, the that level of penetration is always innovation, even if it's just in one discipline. But if that's happening in multiple disciplines, like Spinoza or Leibniz, both of which are great examples, or Goethe, another great example, or Da Vinci, you start to be able to actually form real perception of nature, real perception of existence and being through this multivalent inquiry. And so you see here where you have a almost fundamental being at odds. And the fundamental being at odds is between this genius, right? This prophetic level intelligence that's actually able to further cultural perception, right? Which is an essential contribution at a species level that continues, right? Each person who does this, whether it's at the level of a single discipline or whether it's at the level of a polymathy, contributes fundamentally to the collective aperture of civilization and consciousness. But what you're doing is you're attempting to drag along a cultural consciousness which resides in what it is capable of perceiving. It's the limit of the aperture of the lowest common denominator of the culture itself. You see what I'm saying? It's a huge mass, and you're trying to move that mass along, but that mass is clinging. It's clinging to a myth. It's clinging to a story. It's clinging to an idea of itself that allows it to survive. Right? This is kind of what it is at an existential level to be at odds, because ultimately what the entire species of humanity is doing is to survive. It's trying to survive. It's trying to understand. It's trying to exist in the best way it can on the terms that it knows how to. And you have always throughout history, there's this push and pull of forces. You have the mass, which is the cultural aperture itself, which relies on something like baseball, or relies on something like a cultural story or belief system or a cosmology, which frames reality in a way that it can understand, a tradition that's been passed down, that's been accepted, that actually creates a deep level of community at a cultural level, right? Because we all believe and agree on this same thing, and we know it to be true. It's almost like the temple of baseball. We all agree baseball's 9 innings, there's this, there's that, the mound is this high, and we're all here participating in this communal event, this collective phenomenon, right? So you have this, which is the fabric of reality that has been created within the infrastructure of civilization or any culture. And then you have the artifacts that come from that. And this is why I've come to baseball cards, because baseball was really one of the earliest collective cultural civilizational endeavors that I participated in. It was almost like an introduction into, okay, here's what we're doing here, right? And so in my work, in whether it's in philosophy or science or cosmology, I don't, there's no cultural connection there, because it's not about culture. It's about the fabric of reality and actually understanding that and perceiving it and elucidating it. But the issue with that I understand and understood very clearly, is that it's totally unmoored from these cultural institutions. It's not something that works within them because it shatters them. It takes away the veil of cultural civilizational reality, which is the foundation and the fabric that human beings exist in and upon. It's it's the it's you go into the city or you start walking on the street. This is a collectively created existence, from the architecture to the language. All of it is our common accepted traits that allow us to constitute ourselves as a group. But when you go down those roads, right, whether it's philosophy, whether it's science or cosmology, this is actually about revolutionizing. It's not about regressively remaining within the community infrastructure. It's about the bottom falls out of the baseball field and everything that's there, the concessions, the vendors, the players, all of it falls out. And you're looking at this deeper abyssal level framework, right? You're looking at the composition of particles and atoms. You're looking at the composition of chemical compounds and structures. You're looking at the composition of genetics. You're looking at the the physics of stars, right? And then what you see behind all of this is energy. What you see behind all of it is energy. And then when you bring that back up to the surface, right, back on the everyday world of human beings, the energy of cultural participation is a massive force. It's an absolutely massive force. And that force moves history, right? And so when you look at cultural participation as a massive force that's moving history, how and why is it moving history? It's never moving history from the level of truth. It's moving history from the level of belief, right? The cultural construct of belief, these commonly accepted terms that we have created as a civilization that allow us to interact, create community, create infrastructure, and function, right? If you're to strip that away, again, as we're talking about in this really crucial period of the 30s into the 40s, there's this deep, deep, deep instability. There's this anxiety over identity. There's this fragmentation and fracturing that verges on mass psychological chaos. And you can see this fluctuation throughout the 30s with baseball cards. You can see this. Are we going into this crazy, mythic, dream world, multicolored, cartoon reality of pleasantries? Or are we descending into this cracked glass, fractured, contrast, grayscale reality? The highs and lows, it's almost like a drug of transformation. And so this is what you're looking at. It's like a massive civilization level stallion. It's kicking and bucking, and it's attempting to establish itself. But the key, right, the key that turns the lock of stability and foundation is not in belief. It's not in culture. It's in real truth, right? And what that takes is a level of courage. It takes a level of innovation, and it takes a level of consciousness to be able to penetrate deeply into these disciplines and to unify them, right? Whether that's science, whether that's philosophy, whether that's genetics or cosmology, whether that's history, whether that's psychology, right? And to see and understand and work with and learn with humility all of these different frameworks and apertures and bring them together and create a real multidimensional, multivalent image of existence. That's the hope that we have. Our hope is not to further invest in culture, right? So that's kind of a big statement. So I'll unpack it a little bit. To further invest in culture is to further invest in belief. We create these structures of belief to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel accepted, to feel like we're a part of community, right? to feel like we are a part of whatever country or whatever uh, locality we come from. Because if we don't feel like we're part of that, we're cast off into the wilderness. It's a form of, there's a deep human fear of exile that stems far, far back into the kind of primal existence of our early ancestors. Because if you're exiled in the wilderness at that period of time in human history, it's over, right? You can't survive. It's very, 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 very difficult to hunt, to sustain, to exist, to get water, get food, you name it. So this is a profound kind of psychological crux and turning point. And I've been tracing it through the 20th century and this mythological fluctuation of the image representation of baseball cards or photography or these other apparatuses of visual presentation. Because what visual presentation does is it reveals something unconscious psychologically. And especially through corporate mass-produced baseball cards. These are representatives of a mass cultural phenomenon that are not being created by individuals. This is not an individual level aperture. This is an attempt to represent a civilizational or cultural level aperture. It's a temperature gauge on baseball, right? This is being created and mass produced to present each year or each decade the vision, the kind of psychological, imaginative construct, the vision of baseball at a cultural level. And that changes, right? It shifts because the psychodynamics of a civilization shift. The tectonic plates crack. Certain things are revealed, whether it's corruption, whether it's malice, whether it's the destructive influence of certain beliefs, right? These are all ways that the tectonic plates crack and shift under the perceived foundations of civilizations. And those are never stable unless they're actually based in truth. So this goes back to Socrates. This goes back to Galileo. This is the entire history of the push and pull in Western civilization specifically, because I can reference that very easily, of truth, right? The onus on truth and the attempt towards truth, which is the work of Socrates or the work of Galileo or Copernicus. It's recentering our cultural collective civilizational, even global in terms of a species, recentering our perception of reality in order to actually like see the truth at deeper levels, right? To move further towards the truth and unfortunately, right, away from our regressive belief systems that formerly kept us safe but are just no longer keeping us safe, right? And they barely did before, right? These were things that we created to survive out of desperation because we could not perceive the truth. And so then when you have an innovation, especially like a polymathic innovation, deep philosophical or scientific innovation, what happens is you can reject the truth and rebel against it out of this deep fear of death, right? Which leaving those trappings of culture, it's like a child leaving the womb, right? It's the trappings of culture that hold you and keep you safe and nurture you. And to actually leave those trappings, whether or not it's regressive, it doesn't matter. It represents a step into uncertainty, the unknown, chaos, and potential death, right? And so that's the risk that all great thinkers historically take and have taken. And as is the case with Galileo, or the case with Socrates, or several others, right? We don't need to go into a laundry list. That historically has been met with a fair degree of opposition from the civilization or from the culture, even in the elucidation of truth. And this is very powerful because when you look at a card like this, the Colmenares Immortals card, this is a immortalization, a memorialization of a cultural fabric, a belief system, a structure of baseball, which is human-made. Baseball was created by human beings as a cultural form, which becomes an institution across many nations. Through that, you are building a proxy history. The history of the United States or anywhere else is a proxy history. It's a history of a cultural civilization assemblage. It's something that you piece together. The names, the places, the laws, the rules. Many of It's assembled. When you look at the laws of physics, when you look at the laws of science, when you look at thermodynamics, when you look at biology, that's nature. And we have this immense difficulty as a species to begin to turn toward the laws of nature and to understand them, right? To even attempt, even something as simple as metabolism, to attempt to understand that, to even know it, right? As opposed to our mythological ideas of the human body, of existence, right? These are the tensile poles that oscillate and rupture in human history. This is so much of just like what fundamentally war is about, what conflict is about. Because what we're dealing with is belief systems that believe themselves to be in opposition. We're working at a level of illusion. These frameworks of illusion that are combating to be established as truth. This is the sort of depths of the darkness, the dark age of humanity that continues to spiral on and move forward. Because we are not in truth. We are lost in illusion, and that belief system or that ideology becomes the thing that we protect and fight for with our lives. You understand this is very powerful and very important, because when it comes to culture, when it comes to civilization, what needs to be done is we need to step into reality. Scientific, cosmological, full perception, including philosophy, including real understanding and recognition of history, to step into a real awareness of time and place, where we came from, who we are, where we're going. And it's not a story. That can be communicated in a way that uses metaphors, but it's not a story. It's a reality, right? And so the failure to know reality and the recourse to myth and dream is the cracked foundation, right? This is the cracked foundation of any civilization. It's the thing at the heart and the root that is the corruption, that is its ultimate, always untimely destruction, right? So when we look at this baseball card, there's real ground here. This is someone who made an immense impact on his community. And that's incredibly powerful, right? So there's an honor and dignity and respect that is so important with these baseball cards, because they're immortalizations of human accomplishment. Baseball, like food, is something that holds an entire cultural fabric together. It's an event, it's a happening, it's a way that we gather, it's a way that we understand, it's a way that we communicate. Like language, right? These are things that, if you look deeply enough at them, they're here to be held with a certain level of reverence and respect and dignity. Because beyond that, you're in a confrontation which no one really wants to be in, right? This is the Nietzschean confrontation. It's the confrontation with the void. It's seeing something that penetrates far beyond culture, far beyond civilization, far beyond accepted beliefs and boundaries, and into the deep, deep, deep framework that actually constructs the human being. The real genetic, chemical, thermodynamic constructs. And when you look at that deeply enough, all it is just shadow and light. It's just circulating energy. It's energy that moves through and releases from systems. That's the whole network, right? And when you look at baseball, thermodynamics and energy tension and release is the entirety of the game. It's the coiling of the bat. It's the pitcher's windup, looking at Warren Spahn's windup, the way he rocks and moves forward. The coiling of the hips and the shoulders, moving back to get the bat ready, to move the bat through the zone. The diving play of the center fielder. This is reality playing out through the cultural civilizational aperture. So it really is a very profound and grounded way to express these deeper, deeper, deeper currents of energy and heat and light, which are the real framework of being, the real framework of existence. And if we can reach that, right, if we can reach that as a species, and we can start to understand it, then we're stepping into truth, which actually unites instead of divides, right? But there's so much resistance. And you can sense it, you can always feel it at moments of massive collective change. Because you reveal these things, right? Let's say you reveal something like quantum mechanics, or you reveal something like James Clerk Maxwell did with thermodynamics and electromagnetics. You're revealing fundamental aspects, character traits of existence, of nature, and you're painting the picture. You're assembling the pieces. When Spinoza talks about the indivisible source, the substance, right? You have all of these different ways of expressing this fundamental thing. And you're piecing it all together. This is what we're on a level. We're here for that, because if we don't know the truth, we're lost. We're lost, and the only things that are holding us together are things like baseball. But interestingly enough, right, baseball is an expression, as is and are all things, of this fundamental, essential aspect of nature. And this is something that I've gone far, far, far into in all of my other books. I have like 35 volumes of books of philosophy, of science, of cosmology, that through each step that I took through this network, through understanding Leibniz or understanding Spinoza, understanding through my aperture, right, and connecting the dots between ancient Hindu philosophers, you name it, right? This is all there, and this is groundwork that has been laid across generations, across cultures, to really, really, really try to understand the truth. And understanding the truth is the way in which we can come into a real grounded sense of humanity, who we are, who other people are, what we are. And in doing so, there's a grace, there's a lightness, there's a kindness that comes with that. And that's the kind of the next step of culture and civilization, right? Because we can't live in this divisive mode of, I believe something that you don't, and that makes you evil, or something like that. We moving out of beliefs and moving into real truth, right? Real nature. That is a way in which collaboration is actually deeply possible. So we're seeding that reality. And baseball has been great for me. It's been very fruitful, because through this lens, right, through the simplicity and the honesty, the integrity of a baseball card, it's the small piece of cardboard, you can view the human striving, you can view the grief, you can view the dreams. You can see each of these figures that laid a brick in this massive cultural civilizational structure of baseball and contributed to something that approximates, if not is actually, a real foundation for not only domestic in terms of a national sense, but global community. It's a global language that doesn't require words. You step on a baseball field, if you know anything about baseball, it doesn't matter if you're Japanese or you're Korean or you're Venezuelan or you're Cuban. You share that language of joy and passion and play with whoever you're standing next to. And that's a way in, right? That's a real way in. And maybe people can't ultimately understand thermodynamics. Maybe there isn't a real comprehension that connects thermodynamics to psychology, to cosmology, for many people, if not all people. But we can have forms of real cultural civilizational connection that maybe express a little bit of this so people can understand it. Baseball expresses all of these things. Baseball expresses the struggle for existence, the struggle for survival, the importance and cultivation of the physical body, the striving of a 12-inning chess match between opposing pitchers in the dead ball era or further on. You can see these real human attempts of dignity, of athletic mastery, and that's powerful. And that's something that a lot of people can connect with. So, really interesting topic here. I will end it there, and I will catch you on the next one.